Next up, at UFC Atlantic City, we have Chris Weidman. I love this guy. That pause was for
respect. For Chris
yes,
Weidman.
that's why the pause. That's why I had a pause.
Chris Weidman's a great guy. Even if you don't like him as a fighter on the weigh-in show, that dude's fucking
Who doesn't
hilarious.
like him as a fighter, though?
I don't know. People people hate people for all sorts of reasons. I'm sure those are going to be saying in the chat, be like, oh, Chris Weidman's a fucking douchebag. You know he's 2-7 since USADA came in?
He's not a USADA issue kind of guy, though. Don't see you say shit like that.
It's just a fact.
Well, then he should win this fight because there is no USADA. We got Chris Weidman taking on, and he might win this fight, honestly, taking on Bruno Silva. Chris Weidman, former middleweight champion of the world, at one point in time was in the conversation of maybe one of the best middleweights, or top 5-ish middleweights that we've seen. He's 15-7 in his career, 1-4, unfortunately, in his last 5, but he's coming off that wild leg break. And then he fought Brad Tavares and lost that fight. He is taking on Bruno Silva, 23-10 overall, also only 1-4 in his last 5. He's coming off that decision loss to the Dagestani prospect, Shara Magomedov. It's a tricky fight to break down because I'll start with Chris. He's old. He's 39. He's got years on him as far as wrestling is concerned, fighting. His legs snapped clean in half a few years ago. He came back, and it's the worst he's ever looked. Like, he looked terrible. Physically, he didn't look the same. He was just slow. Like, he just looked like a shell of himself. And you know what? His legs snapped clean in half, and he took 2 years off. And maybe that's what that was. But Anderson Silva, who oddly enough snapped his leg against Chris Weidman, he came back after that. Didn't look as bad as Chris looked. He didn't look as bad as Chris looked. Like, he didn't. I got it. Yeah. Chris Weidman looked pretty bad in that last fight. And that's why this line is what it is. But Chris Weidman, if we're just looking at his skills and we're looking at what he's accomplished and who he was before the leg break, because we don't quite know who he is after the leg break just yet, because that last fight just might literally be an anomaly. Very good college wrestler who's got good technical striking and some dog in him. Chris Weidman was the middleweight champion for a reason. He beat Anderson Silva twice. One was a leg break fluke, and the other one was he just kept moving forward, kept striking when Anderson got a little too comfortable moving that head around. He's taking on Bruno Silva. Bless you. He's taking on Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva has wild, heavy hands. He's a good striker with insane power and solid BJJ. He can knock your head off at any moment, or he can start grappling. I don't imagine he's going to grapple in this fight, but he can start grappling if he wants to. He's got great hands, and he hits like a truck, but he is hittable himself. He's got a negative striking differential, and he's very hot and cold. You can't always trust him. He came in here, and he knocked out Brad Tavares, who's insanely durable. Then he goes in there, and he just does nothing. Gets touched up. He is coming off that loss to the Dagestani prospect. We actually looked surprisingly good, considering he was supposed to get tooled. He got 3 takedowns. You're making that face. Showed how tough he is. Had some takedowns.
He was almost quitting while on top of a guy. I've never seen that before in my life.
Yeah, but Shara was supposed to be like the greatest thing of all time.
He fucking smoked him. He was even smoking him from the fucking bottom with elbows and stuff.
He lost the first round. What a joke.
Like shit, dude.
Anyway, we got the 1-4 versus the 1-4. And I think the UFC, I think they're trying to get Chris a win here. I don't know who else at middleweight that they would put there where they're like super confident that would be reasonable. This is a reasonable fight. I am going to pick Bruno Silva, unfortunately. And it pains me to do that, but I do think Bruno's going to get it done. Chris just looked so bad in that last fight. And I think it's just a lot to overcome. I couldn't imagine my leg breaking clean in half, having to nurse it back, like just all the things. I think Chris is going to come out. It's going to be at home. It's going to feel like a huge, big thing, but he's a little slower. He's not quite what he used to be. And Bruno Silva can still be good, can still be dangerous. I think Bruno Silva wins, but I'll be full-blown rooting for Chris Weidman. And it's not the craziest thing of all time if Chris Weidman wins, but I think he's just a little too old at this point. What do you think, Jakey boy?
Yeah, I'm not a real, how do I say this politely? I'm not a fucking pussy like you. So I am going to pick Chris Weidman. I think that this is going to be a Robbie Lawler moment. The UFC wants Chris Weidman to win this fight. They wanted him to come back and win that last fight, and they thought that they were doing him a favor with Brad Tavares because Brad Tavares isn't a dangerous guy. So they thought, let's put this guy against somebody that's not dangerous, and hopefully Chris can work his way back into the fight, get the takedowns he needs. But the issue was that it was actually a bad match for Chris Weidman because Brad Tavares is such a durable guy and will kind of wait back, touch you up, and has incredible takedown defense. And Weidman just really couldn't get. He was getting touched up on the entries and really couldn't get to the legs. And Brad Tavares is always going to be around, so it's not like he could like wear down and eventually get the takedown. So that, honestly, they were trying to set him up as like not a dangerous fighter, but it was kind of a bad matchup. This is a great matchup for Chris Weidman. I understand that Bruno hits hard and he could knock out Weidman. People be like, oh, he's going to get knocked out, and that could happen. But Chris Weidman knows, and everybody in this fight knows, that if he gets out of this first round, Bruno Silva falls off a fucking cliff. Even against Shara, like you mentioned, he got those takedowns, and that's against terrible takedown defense. Barely got these takedowns. He was on top, just like laying there, just fucking dying on top. He lost those rounds in a top position because he was just fucking laying there about to fucking die. There is a moment in that Brad Tavares fight where his legs were chewed to fucking shit. He was having issues. You could tell he was frustrated. But there was a moment in that second round where he went like, and he pointed right at fucking Brad Tavares, and he fucking pointed right at his legs, and he just fucking kept, from that moment on, it felt like, before that moment, he was like unsure. Right? It was like he's back, and it's like, I think in that moment he flipped the switch and he was like, all right, I'm fucking back. Guess what? No matter what happens in this fight, I am marching forward, and I am coming forward, and I'm going to keep coming forward no matter fucking what. And he lost that fight, and it didn't look good doing it. But if he has that same attitude, if he survives that first round, has that same attitude in front of the home fans, looks at Bruno Silva and says, guess what, motherfucker? I'm not going to stop coming, and I'm going to keep on coming, and I'm going to keep on coming. He is going to destroy Bruno Silva in the second round, and even if it gets out of the second round, he's going to destroy him in the third round and have a Robbie Lawler moment. So obviously he's got to survive the power early, but if he gets out of this first round, fucking Chris Weidman can take over this fight, man. Especially Bruno getting wild with the fucking, a heavy striker throwing wild shit for somebody that has got takedowns in wrestling. That's what you want. Level change, boom, easy. I think he wins this fight because I'm not a pussy.
Okay. Well, I hope he wins this fight. I just don't think he will. We got $6,900 in DraftKings. I don't think he was worth $6,900 in his last fight, and I agree with you where Brad Tavares might have been a tougher matchup because he couldn't get it to the ground and Brad's durable. But I disagree in Brad's not dangerous at all. Bruno is dangerous. And I don't know if he's going to knock out Chris because I'm not worried about Chris being chinny. I am worried about Chris he faded hard. It wasn't even just, I'm not confident in my leg. Like he was gassed. He faded hard. I do remember the whole let's get it. It's a little too much, a little too little too late. Yeah, it's too little too late, but I'll be rooting for Chris. I hope he wins for a million different reasons. I am going to be on the Bruno side. $9,200 in DraftKings. It's a little risky though because I don't think he's going to finish Chris Weidman. I don't think Bruno Silva is going to finish Chris Weidman. But I do think he can squeak out a win, stay busy, make something happen here. Are you going to spend the $6,900 in DraftKings? I imagine you are. You picked him. He's a dog.
I think it's an interesting play for sure. People are like, that's a biased pick, Jacob. That's why I have no bias to Chris Weidman.
Yeah, I don't know why you
have no bias to Chris Weidman. I broke this fight down how I see it. Bruno Silva fucking death gasses usually in the second round, and Chris Weidman can maybe survive. I was very open that he could get fucking knocked out. Somebody high possibility, but I think if he gets out of the first round, he's very live.
Well, and I said, in my breakdown of Bruno Silva, I said he's hot and cold in his fights. And somebody was like, Bruno Silva's record makes no sense. He went to a decision with Alex Pereira. We actually looked decent at times. He went to a decision with Alex Pereira and then got finished by Gerald Mearshart. And you're right. That doesn't make any sense. That's the problem with Bruno Silva. You don't know what version you're going to get. But this should be a fun fight. This goes back to the comment I said earlier where somebody commented, a lot of 50-50 fights here, and I love it. When you're betting, you don't want 50-50 fights. But as a fan, these super close fights with these narratives, you don't know who's going to win. Awesome. These fights are awesome. I'm going to be looking forward to this fight. If you want to watch this fight with a couple of bets in hand and a couple of tools like a DraftKings optimizer, line movement tracker, some data, just go to WeWantPicks.com, click Become a Member at the top. It's only $10 for an entire month. Every single event in that 30-some-odd day period, you will have at your fingertips for just $10. WeWantPicks.com. Click Become a Member at the top. We do have a super chat from Seamus Murphy. He said, Chris Weidman, Jacobs' lock of the week.
He didn't say Jacobs. I think he might have been talking about his own.
He might have been talking about his own. Let's move on. Before you go, let me give you $50. Anybody who goes to WeWantPicks.com/bets and signs up with any one of our affiliate partners gets $50 as a thank you. Use the link, sign up, make a deposit. We send you $50 as a thank you.